Good morning. Welcome to Industry Week 22, Day 2. Today we have a talk from Megan Matthews of Carrot Cake Studios, who's here to talk to you about her game design journey. So focusing on level design and also going to tell you some absolute gold in regards to setting up your portfolios. Remember to share your experiences using the hashtag IW22. And if you tag Confetti's Instagram and Twitter, you can enter a draw to win a £50 Amazon voucher. Please keep your mobile phones turned off. And if there is a fire, please head towards the fire exit, follow the signs, and the collection point is on Brook Street. So, without further ado, Megan Matthews.
Thank you. Just waiting for the presentation to come up on the screen. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about navigating the industry as a graduate or a student. I myself graduated last year, so I've been employed since just before I graduated up until now. So I've had about 8 months, 9 months in the industry, and I thought it would be really valuable for me to share with you what my time was like, because I have a great insight into what the industry looks like right now. And it's a good present moment thing. Are we going to bring the slides up? Thank you. So here's just a little talk outline of what I'm going to be talking about. At the end, I'm going to revisit this thing about your goals. So I want you to think about what your goal is in the industry. If you have a particular role you want to work in, or if there's a particular studio you want to work at, just keep that in your mind throughout the presentation, and then at the end I'm going to go through how you can break down that goal and what steps you should take in order to get there. And that might evolve throughout your career. You might change your goal, or you might feel like something suits you better, and that is totally fine. You don't have to have the same goal throughout your career. And then right at the end we'll also have some time for some questions if you have any. So first up, I just want to say a little bit of an introduction about myself. So I'm Megan. I'm interested in making games that are accessible and relaxing, sort of like little puzzle games and things like that. And I've been working in the indie games industry throughout my career. So I've not been working at large companies. I've been working at smaller companies on sort of smaller budget games. And that's what I'm used to working on. And then there's just a little couple of things here about sort of my personality, which is very useful in the industry because people do care about that sort of thing. And I'm sort of into photography and nature, and online you might see me as like a little avocado wearing a blue hoodie. That's just how I present myself because I love avocados, so I'm often looking like this online. I graduated last year in July. And here are the games I've worked on since then. So I've worked on 4 titles since I have graduated. 2 of them are indie games that have funding, so they will be published this year. So I'll have my name against 2 published indie games. And then the other 2, one of them is a personal project, and then this one here, Trailer Tales, is a game that we're taking forward for publishing. So it's being publicized currently, and we're going through pitching to publishers and grants and that sort of thing. So I'm going to take you back to the start of my journey. So I started really my journey at university. I studied game design and art as a degree, and I hadn't made a game prior to starting my degree. I'd really only used programming tools and created 3D modeling tools, and I had no idea what role I wanted to do in the industry. I didn't know where I wanted to be. I just knew I wanted to work in games for a living. So I spent a lot of time at university exploring what I might want to do, and I participated in a lot of game jams. And these here are all game jam games, and I have many more of them. But it was a really helpful way to identify what my strengths and weaknesses were. And then during my second year at university, I also joined a mentorship program called Limit Break Mentorship. There are many other mentorship programs you can join as well, and I will talk about those in a bit. But that was a fantastic way for me to be able to talk to someone in industry who currently already had a job and ask them questions about interviews, portfolios, cover letters, and just generally how things work and operate. And I highly recommend that if you can find a mentorship, you do try and do one, because it was one of the most helpful things for me when I first started out my career. Moving on from university, during our final year, we had one big project that we had to make a video game in. And I worked on my own, and we took our game to several different events and got to show it to the public, and it became quite popular on Twitter. And on Twitter, I started networking with people through there, kind of reached out to lots of different devs, and that's how my networking came about, and that's how I know people in the industry, is from making this first game and sort of self-publishing it myself. And then a month before my degree finished, I applied to 2 different things, and I've written them down here. One of them was a junior level designer role, and the other one was a sort of scholarship to a summer program. And this summer program is like made to boost you into the industry, so if you haven't got a job yet, it lines one up for you. And they basically, the way I found those jobs was the first one, the CEO had given us a lecture, and I reached out to him and said, hey, I've seen you have a role open, I loved your lecture, and I sort of talked to him about what he said already, so I had like a connection there. And then the second role, the community manager for Code Coven reached out to me and told me to apply. So it really just shows how important it is to network, because you will get those connections, and they will reach out to you if you are friendly enough to them. And then I started working on both jobs at the same time. So the summer program with Code Coven, we were creating this game called Trailer Tales, which is like a bite-sized isometric puzzle game where you play through narrative stories. And we worked in a global team of 4 on that project. And then after the project, we decided that we wanted to keep working on it further. So we began creating pitch decks to get funding for the game, and that's what we're continuing to do now. And then at Playtrue Games, I was working on a game called Grid Force Mask of the Goddess, which is a grid-based battle game, which wasn't really my cup of tea in terms of what I wanted to be working on. So it kind of diverted my goals to be working on relaxed games again, but it definitely gave me some great experience and connections. Yeah, and I wanted to note here that I only worked for Playtrue for 3 months, and you'll find that's quite common if you do join an indie startup team, because they don't have the budget to hire you for a long term, but it will give you some good experience if that's what you are looking to get. And then after I did both of these things at the same time, I experienced burnout, which is something you might experience if you end up doing too many things at the same time. So after completing those 2 jobs, I decided to go freelance, and I'm currently working on the Garden Path at Carrot Cake Studio as a freelance environment designer, which is very much the same role as a level designer, but I'll get onto that in a bit. And then I also have some time to obviously continue pitching this game to publishers with my team, Lost Camper Games, which are at the bottom there. There's obviously a lot of risks with funding the creation of your own game. So I do recommend, if that's something you're looking to do, it's good to take it slow and steady. And what I'm trying to do at the moment is get some experience in other roles before I decide to work on a project like that full time. And I was going to talk a little bit about my next steps and sort of how my goals come into that. So in the short term, I'm looking more for a full-time game design role to get that experience that I want to have in order to publish this game. And then mid-term, we want to publish the game so that we have some publisher experience, because my long-term goal is to create my own indie studio, and I don't want to jump into something straight away that I won't know how to manage or organize. So I'm really breaking down my actual long-term goal into smaller steps that are easily achievable, and then going from there. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about what the industry looks like for a graduate. So what the current state is like, and what you as students, or maybe when you graduate, might see. So you're in a fantastic space right now because there's loads of places to help. There are more jobs popping up than I've ever seen before. And it can seem a little bit scary at first, but the sooner you start looking at job postings, the more familiar you'll become with what studios are asking for. And I do suggest that as you go through your course, you have a little look at job descriptions and see what the bullet points are and see if there's anything you could be doing while you're doing your course to sort of fit those bullet points. And if it's a case of experience, just ignore that point and then go for the other points that are there. Many games jobs right now are remote, so it's more accessible to people who would find it hard to relocate in other areas. And a lot of jobs are asking for an education in games-related field, which is fantastic for you all because you're obviously studying that kind of thing. There's also a UK government scheme that they're hoping to continue called Kickstart. So if you do finish university and you can't get a job, there is a scheme where if you claim universal credit, you can apply to these Kickstart jobs and the government will try to help you to get a job. So even if things are looking a little bit rough, you're having a hard time getting a job, there are all these places that will help you out. So definitely check those out in your own time. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about studio types and sizes because there's a huge difference between the job postings in the size of studio. So I've noticed this quite a lot because I work in the indie games field. But you might find it difficult to learn there if that's something that you're interested in doing. So with an indie role, you kind of have to be a little bit more confident of yourself that you can do things, and you have to be happy to make mistakes and repair those mistakes because you often won't have somebody to back you up. And then I'm going to talk about a little bit about these last four here, which are obviously quite different. So with publishers, they will offer jobs to people like contractors. So, for example, you could be a designer working for a publisher who has an outsourcing team. So, I don't know if you guys have heard of Team 17, but they publish the game Overcooked, and they have a design team at Team 17, who is the publisher, who will help the dev team of Overcooked. And you can work for publishers like that, and you'll get to work on lots of different projects. And they sometimes hire graduates, and they sometimes hire more experienced people, but that is just an option for you there. And then you have the option of outsourcing studios, which are usually just groups of people who will help work on different projects. Sometimes you'll get your name in the credits, sometimes you won't. You'll get like a big lump sum fee at the start. And then there's mobile studios, who are hiring lots of graduates at the moment, and students. They also do work experience at these sort of places, the smaller mobile studios. But you do have to be a little bit careful because their sort of morals and ethics can be harsh for some people in those workplaces, like microtransactions and loot boxes and those kind of things. And then with freelance, which is what I'm doing at the moment, it can be very hard to get the ball rolling because you usually want to have a little bit of experience before you start doing freelance projects. But it does give you the benefit of being very flexible, and you can come and do things like this. You can come and do talks, you can go and travel, you can basically do a lot of whatever you want, as long as you're doing your work. And then that kind of brings me on to job titles as well. So at the start I said I'm a freelance environment designer, but I was actually looking for game design roles, and I stumbled across an environment design role. And when I read it, I thought, oh, that looks a lot like a level design role. And pretty much the guy just didn't know what a level designer was. So he'd written environment designer, and he didn't know what a level designer would do. And when I explained to him that actually your role sounds a lot more like a level designer, he was like, oh, I probably should have posted that then. So what I'm trying to say is when you do look at jobs, don't rule out ones that have different titles, because you often find that people will just name them the thing that they think it is, when actually you could have the skill set to fill that role. And then I wanted to give you a couple of places to find help as a graduate, or a student. This is a big, long list, and hopefully I can give this to you somehow so you will have a copy of it. But these are places that I have personally used to get help, or my friends have, or people who I know who've got into the industry. There's lots of mentorship things at the top here, and then there's a lot of companies that, or charities that help with specific people in industry, so maybe marginalized folks in industry, or people struggling with mental health issues. All of these are fantastic places to go to if you do have issues with that and you would like some help. And then along here are sort of companies that might help you with funding. So if at the end of your degree or your course you might find that you want to take a project forward, these are great places for help with that. So they could give you some money to continue working on it, or they can give you a space or help to go forward with that. Then I've got some Discord servers. I hope you all know what Discord is if you want to work in the games industry. But these are fantastic places for you to post your portfolio or your CV or cover letters or anything like that, along with projects. And you can get some fantastic feedback. One of the best ones is this first one here, Work with Indies. They have fantastic people on there who will help with portfolios. There's constantly people posting them in there and getting feedback. So I definitely recommend if you need help with that and you just want an outsider opinion, that's a great place to go. And then at the bottom, as I said before, I did lots of game jams before I got into the industry. And one particular game jam I did had an industry mentor, and that was through Yuki, which is here at the bottom. And the industry mentor at the end of the game jam basically offered us all jobs, because the game jam that we did was so impressive to him that he asked us if we'd like to work for him in the future. I didn't end up working for him, but it is a fantastic way to make connections like that and to really show your skills and also your people skills, because with the game jam you are usually working in a team. But yeah, if you can find one with an industry mentor or judge, that is the best way possible. And then I was going to talk a little bit about what I do day to day in my role currently, and how each role I've had has been different. So my first role I had as a junior level designer, I joined the team in quite a late stage of the production, and you'll find that if you get a graduate or student role, you will be joining near the end of a production cycle. You won't be joining right at the start, so you won't have a lot of say on what the final product might look like, but you definitely have a say on what's currently there. And that's something I didn't know before I got into the industry. I had no idea at what stage of the project I'd be joining. So just, if you do go into an interview, definitely ask them what stage they're at. That was something I needed to ask. And with Playtree Games, there wasn't really wiggle room for big story or character changes, so I didn't really get to play around with level design so much, but I got to play around a lot with like AI and move sets. And I wrote a little bit down here. There's a lot of text on here about what I did and what my day-to-day looked like. So we used the Scrum or Agile framework. If you don't know what that is, I definitely would go and have a look at it, because lots of indie companies use that framework to create their games. And every 2 weeks we had a sprint review. So we review how things are going, and then we check on it from there. And that's basically how I get all my tasks assigned to me, is through this sprint review. So it's a lot of testing the game and logging bugs and seeing where things are going wrong. Because I was brought in to fix the gameplay aspects of the game, I had to play the game a lot, and I had to get other people to play the game a lot and watch them play it. And it also meant that I had to take a lot of playtesting feedback and compile it into more deliverable things. So this basically means that I had to see where the pain points were and ask the team to fix those. Yeah, but it's a lot of in-engine tweaking values and then seeing what happens when you play and just writing down, adding to the spreadsheet, things like that. May look a bit boring, but that's kind of what a first role is going to look like in the industry. You might be just doing something small that really will make an impact on the game. And then I moved on after that paid role to being a freelance environment designer. And this is a lot more laid back. I can decide what hours I want to work. And I'm really like my own boss. So it's nice that I can kind of choose what I want to do and when I want to do it. But I still use a lot of spreadsheets. Over here is just like a little GIF of me making an environment for the game. And there's lots of these environments, about 50 of them that I've made, and they all piece together like puzzle pieces to make a map in the game, and that's pretty much what I work on. And I have to kind of incorporate the story and think about what the player is going to be doing. And I do a lot of sketching and just tinkering around in Engine to try and get things to look great. And then I pretty much see what it would look like for the player, so I zoom in to where the player might see, and I send the environment off to the client. And then when he gets back to me and tells me the thing he's changing or if it looks great, I'll make those modifications and send them back. So it really is sort of a very independent role, and if you are looking into getting into this, you kind of need to have an idea of what you're doing. But this is also in Go.Engine. This isn't in Unity or Unreal, but I had never used Go.Engine beforehand, so I had to learn that as well. But if you do know things like Unity, you might have a very good chance of learning how to use another engine, because they're all very similar, it looks. And then another role that I'm currently still doing, but just very slowly in the background, is I'm still a game designer for Trailer Tales, which is our game that we're working on getting funding for. I create a lot of levels for this game and puzzles for people to solve. But I not only take on the role of a game designer, but I also take on a role of a founding studio member, which often means I also have to input into pitching, the publicity of the game, and what direction we should be taking the game in. So it's not only being a game designer, there's a front to it as well. So your personality matters in that sense. And the game design work that I do mainly consists of taking the story and then working out a scenario that the player could play through. And then I give that the mechanics to the programmer, and I give the level to the environment artist, and they both do a fantastic job of coming up with a space for the player to play in. Yeah, and then once I get it back, I do some testing, both internally and with other people, like the public, and I get feedback for that, and we work on what could be improved. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about portfolios. And this is specifically for game or level designers, and I'm going to be looking a bit more at this, going for indie game roles. So if you are looking to go for a bigger or AAA company, just take this advice with sort of a pinch of salt. Like, you can look at and take the things that you think would be useful. But because I'm not somebody who works in those bigger companies, I can't tell you exactly how they would want your portfolio to look. But yeah, I wanted to create like a little analogy for you to think of portfolios, because I found them very confusing as a student. And they really are like giving a gift to somebody. So you think of the recipient you're going to give the gift to and what they might want or like. And when you give them the gift, you usually give yourself some time to go and get it. So maybe you'll go out shopping, or you'll order it on Amazon or whatever. But you think carefully about the contents of the gift and also how it's presented. Like, do you wrap it up or put it in a box? And when you finally give the gift to the person, they usually have a reaction to it, and it could be good or bad. But you sort of read their face and see what they think. And with portfolios, they're very similar in a way that you have to think of the recipient. So who is looking at your portfolio and what are they looking for? And you also think about the amount of time you need to spend on your portfolio. You don't want to spend more time than you need to. So you create a time scale for yourself. And you think carefully about the contents of your portfolio and how it creates a neat little package. And then how you're presenting it. So it could be a website, a blog, you could be putting it on ArtStation, whatever feels comfortable for you. And then at the end, they will react to it. And also don't be afraid to ask for feedback, whether it's the person who needs to be looking at it or if it's just somebody you want to look at it. I think this is a great way to think about portfolios, is like they're giving presents. So I wanted to talk a bit about portfolios and what is a good thing to include in them, especially for a designer. So I have a landing page on mine, which consists of 4 to 6 projects that I want to showcase, and I usually change these out per role. So if I'm applying for lots of, say, more roles that are requiring balancing games, I will put more of these sort of games up there. And then if I'm applying for more relaxed puzzle games, I'm going to put more relaxed puzzle games up on this slideshow reel. So this basically rolls round and there's 6 on there. And then I also include a little introduction at the bottom. And you want that to be really short and sweet and just get to the point of what you're there for. And I think really what makes me stand out from other people is the fact that I have a specific type of game that I'm looking to work on. So if you're somebody who really enjoys a specific type of game, maybe it's like a strategy game or 3D point and click games or whatever your game interests are, I definitely would express that here because it doesn't rule you out from other roles. I got this action role with this portfolio, so I don't think they really cared that I wanted to work on relaxing games. They just cared about my skills and what I could do at the time. And then I also have a little project page, which has all of my projects I actually want to showcase on there. I've had some mixed feedback before applying to roles about including more than 6 projects on my page, but I think I have 12 on there. And because I have that featured page on my first page, people don't tend to look through these unless they really want to see what I've worked on. Which is usually a good thing because they'll ask me about games that aren't on my slideshow reel. And this is a great place to show your wide range of knowledge, especially if you're applying for indie teams, because they want to see that you can do things other than design. So maybe you can also work on music or programming or whatever sparks your interest. But yeah, keep it clean and fairly readable because whoever's reading it is not going to have the time to read loads and loads of words, and you have to bear that in mind whenever you make your portfolio. It's got to be quick and to the point. And yeah. And this is just some advice on what to include under those projects. So specific things I would include are well-explained diagrams and screenshots, and then GIFs of actual gameplay. They're a fantastic, screen to GIF is a good piece of software that's very quick to make GIFs with. And then make sure that underneath any images you have, you include descriptions explaining why you're showing this to them, because often people will just slap really pretty images on there and not explain why they're showing that image. Make it clear what you contributed to a project if you're in a team. And it's a good idea to include a summary at the bottom, a post-mortem or a retrospective, that really talks about what was good in the project, and try to be positive when you talk about projects as well. It's not a great idea to negatively talk about a project unless you're going to back it up with something positive, like this went wrong, but I learned this. You have to kind of always bring it back to a positive mindset. And then the only thing I really wanted to give you some don't do this on was flashy trailer reels that don't have any explanation. They can be a bit of a bait in the industry. Lots of people have them, and it just shows lots of images or videos of games they've worked on looking very pretty, but they can give the wrong impression. It's like you've worked on loads of things, but you haven't actually explained what you did. And that can come across in the wrong way sometimes. So do be careful about that. If you decide to make a video or trailer reel, just include some text to say why you're doing that and what you worked on within those. And then here's just a little example of what a project looks like. So if you click into one of my projects on my portfolio, this is what comes up. I always explain what status the project's in. So if I'm still working on it currently, I'll write like, this is my current role. Or if it's seeking publishing, or if it's a vertical slice or a game jam, this is a great place to put it, because you can put game jams in your portfolio. No one is upset about that. And you really should make it coherent and easy to read. So if you can, I'd come up with a template for yourself. So every project should follow a template that you have. This is my template, just as an example for you guys. So I have description at the top and like, you know, the nitty-gritty about the project. Some nice GIF or gameplay trailer of that specific game. And then you want to really go into bullet pointing what you worked on. So down there I've got all the bullet points of things I worked on in this project. And then I like to do this deep dive sections at the bottom. So I'll title one like game design, and then write, this will include my diagrams and things, and then I'll title one level design, and then I'll show like my grey boxing there, and go a little bit more into depth about what I did. And then there's just some like specific do's and don'ts. I know I covered a couple earlier, but I wanted to put this here because when I was at university, I heard quite a lot of horror stories of portfolios, and I just don't want you to make any mistakes like that are quite obvious like this. So really be careful with 18+ artwork or NSFW projects. It's not appropriate in specific workplaces, and this can be for many reasons, either religious or sensitive reasons. So if this is something you want to show, like for example, you want to be working on 18+ horror games, I really do suggest that you either have a separate portfolio for like applying to horror games, or a separate section on your portfolio that says it's graphic content, because some people, hiring managers, when they look at that, that can put them off completely. So just be sensitive about what you're showing in that regard. And try to speak positively about projects, as I said before, and don't bring down other people in your writing. So if you have been in a group, and we all have been there, where somebody hasn't done a lot of work, don't write that in your portfolio. It comes across really badly, like you're a bad team player. And be clear about what you did, but don't write an essay. If it takes too long for somebody to read, they will never see all of it, and hiring managers don't usually have a lot of time to read through these things. If you do struggle with not writing an essay, using bullet points is the quickest way to display that sort of thing to somebody. So if you find you're writing paragraphs and paragraphs, just bullet point it out. It will be a lot easier for you. And you know, I've had some fantastic feedback from my portfolios during interviews, and it's also being used in Grads in Games, which is like an organization that helps students and graduates to get jobs. It's being used as an example piece, and there's also some fantastic portfolios that are in those example pieces as well. So if you are looking at examples so you can kind of get an idea of what you should do, definitely check out Grads in Games and have a look and see what they have on their website for that. Yeah, and then I'm coming back to the end here, just talking about different journeys. So I wanted you to think back to the goal that you thought of at the start of the presentation, and really think about how you can break that down. So I don't really want you to follow exactly what I did in my journey into the industry, but I do want you to take away the parts that you think might be useful to you. So everyone has a different path into the industry, and some people will be quicker or slower to get a job than others. But you do need to keep in mind what your goals are and work out the steps you need to complete in order to get there. Something my mentor told me about was this idea of breaking down your goals into long-term and short-term goals, which is something I showed you I had at the start. And you may have a goal that looks really big at the moment, but remember, it might be 6 or 7 years away, and you have to do things in the meantime to get there. And yeah, just have a little think about whether or not that goal has changed or broken down. And as you go through your career, it might change and move around and fit into the situation you're in. So I recommend that you revisit that goal from time to time. And if you go into a different role and you actually think maybe that's what I want to do, just change it and write it down. I do realize I've been a bit quicker than I was supposed to be. But this is where I was going to say thank you and let you guys ask questions. And yeah, I do have my contact information up on the screen. And if you want to contact me and ask me any questions, Twitter is the best place to do it. I am happy to answer questions. Just be aware that sometimes I am busy, so it might take me a little minute to reply to them. But yeah, thank you very much for listening. That went a lot quicker than I thought it would do.
As we have a bit of extra time, is it okay to open the floor for some questions?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Is there anyone who has any questions? If you raise your hand.
Which of your projects did you most enjoy working on?
I think this current one is my favourite personally because it's exactly the sort of game I wanted to be working on. It's a relaxing garden simulation game, which is like, I love nature, I love creating levels, and that's exactly what I'm doing. And I'm doing it in my own time. So definitely the garden path is my favourite project at the moment. But it really did make me change my goal, because originally I was like, oh, I just want to work on a relaxing game. And now I'm there, I'm like, what do I do next? I have no idea. So yeah, I think that's my favourite project so far.
Anyone else want to raise your hand? You again.
Of the projects that weren't quite the type of game you want to be working on, was there any part of them that you enjoyed more than you thought you would?
Yeah, so I hated spreadsheets before I got a role in the industry. And as soon as I started working on Grid Force, I just had like 10 spreadsheets of like game balancing that I thought I would hate doing, but I actually really enjoyed doing it. Just like keeping the data organized and making sure that when you put the numbers in at the end, it's green. That was actually something that surprised me that I enjoyed, was just balancing game mechanics and creating like combat moves. I'd never really tried to do that before, so that was quite interesting to me. And it's actually made me want to work on tactics games. So a game role that I'm playing for at the moment is actually a turn-based tactic game, which I didn't think I'd be working on, but I'm quite excited for the opportunity to work on something like that. So yeah. Are there any other questions?
If you can raise your hand high so I can see you. Oh, I've one back here.
Hi, Megan.
Hello.
We often talk to our students about resilience as a really important skill, especially when entering the industry in junior roles at that part of that part of the journey. What can you tell us about how you've overcome issues that have developed your resilience?
Yeah, so that is quite a tricky question for me to answer, because I have been in the right place at the right time every single time. So I've not had this 6 months of no job and constant applications. But I do have friends who have had that, and they've been talking to me throughout their process and their journey. And I think it's really about realizing that it's very uncommon for you to get a job straight away. It's not something that a lot of people do. But you need to realize that your skills are enough. Sometimes it's just the way you're presenting yourself, or it could be a specific thing that you're trying to do that just isn't quite working out. And the resilience there is finding the thing that isn't working and then trying to improve upon that thing, and kind of just not giving up. And again, I think going back to like having a mentor, that is one of the most helpful things there, because a lot of them, it did take them 6 months, a year to get into the industry, and they really understand how hard that can be. So if you feel quite alone in that journey, make sure you've just got your peers with you or a mentor to sort of guide you through that type of thing, because I think it's a very hard thing to do on your own, for sure. Or you've even got, your university lecturers can help you through that sort of thing as well. Don't disregard them.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, well, Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you very much.
It's been enlightening. And thank you very much, our guest. We want to have a couple of sound bites from you, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
So we just wait until these guys go, and
Yeah.
then we'll do that.
To talk in the silence, I was going to shout more, just make it super awkward. But thanks for that, that's great.
That's okay. I'm sorry it was so short. I thought it would be a bit longer, but when you practice in person, you're like breathing, and then when you actually say it, you're like, oh, I'm talking so quickly. But no, it's been a fantastic experience.